2.3 million years ago, the Earth was a completely different place. There were no cities, no metals, and no dazzling civilizations. Instead, vast grasslands stretched endlessly. Sparse forests, thick shrubs, rivers, and lakes. And ruling over it all were massive, majestic beasts in the land known as the cradle of humanity. Africa's Great Rift Valley, a fragile new creature had just appeared. Small in stature, not as swift as a zebra, not as strong as a buffalo, and lacking the claws and fangs of lions or leopards. These were our ancestors, Homo habilis and the early Homo erectus. Before them lay a harsh and unforgiving world, survive or vanish forever. Yet even as they stood surrounded by predators, early humans carried within them a different kind of weapon intelligence. This is the story of how prehistoric humans, once the hunted, slowly learned to escape the jaws of death, and ultimately rose to become masters of the planet. Let us turn back time and return to East Africa 2.3 million years ago. The landscape is vast and teeming with life. Herds of giant primitive elephants move slowly across the grasslands. Zebras and antelopes gather in groups for protection. In the distance, ancient giraffes stretch their long necks to reach the tender leaves of the acacia trees. But peace is only a thin veil. Behind the bushes in the shadows of the forest, predators are watching. Cheetahs, primitive lions, massive hyenas, and most fearsome of all, the saber-toothed smilodon, a beast with blade-like fangs. Faced with such threats, early humans were truly vulnerable. Their bodies stood just over a meter tall, their brains only a third the size of ours today. No claws, no speed, no strength. By day they moved cautiously through the grasslands, their eyes constantly alert. And at night, when the sun set and darkness fell, fear would rise. The roars of predators echoed in the distance. Every sound in the night could be a sign that death was drawing near. Humans at that time were not hunters. They were prey. So in a world so harsh and unforgiving, what was it that allowed them to survive? In a world teeming with predators, the fragility of early humans seemed to leave no room for survival. And yet, in those dark and perilous days, a turning point emerged. Our ancestors discovered their very first weapon. It wasn't a gleaming sword, nor a spear forged from metal. It was nothing more than crude stones picked up from the ground. Homo habilis, the handyman, had learned how to sharpen the edges of stone to create tools. A sharp rock could slice meat from a carcass, crack open bones, and extract the rich, energy-filled marrow within. With a stone in hand, they were no longer entirely helpless. This was humanity's first step in learning how to transform nature into a weapon of its own. At first, these tools were used simply for cutting and chopping, but it wasn't long before humans realized stone could also become a shield against the wild. Picture a late afternoon on the grasslands. A group of Homo erectus is foraging for food. Suddenly, the silhouettes of giant hyenas appear on the horizon. They charge forward, eyes, glowing jaws, flashing in the fading light. If all they had were bare hands, humans would have become dinner in moments. But this time, they did not run. Each one picked up a stone, gripped it tightly. They shouted, hurling the rocks at their attackers. The sharp sound of impact rang through the air. The hyenas hesitated, then backed away. For the first time, the hunted had made the hunters think twice. That first weapon was so crude, we might hesitate to call it a weapon at all. Yet in that moment, the stone became a declaration. Humanity would not passively accept the role of prey. These tools were not just for self-defense. They opened a new door, food gathering. Large bones left behind by other predators were now cracked open by human hands. The fatty, nutrient-rich marrow became a vital source of energy. With this fuel, the brains of our ancestors began to grow, and with it, something invisible yet powerful began to emerge: intelligence. But stone wasn't the only thing they mastered. Humans also learned to harness fire. At first, fire was a source of fear. It erupted after storms scorched the grasslands and forced both beasts and humans to flee. But over time, people began to see its power and claim it. They preserved embers from natural wildfires tucked into branches or carried in smoldering coals. The small flame became a shield in the dark, a defense against the claws of the wild. Imagine a pitch-black night. Outside, the roar of a saber-toothed cat echoes through the darkness. But inside a small cave, a group of early humans huddles around a flickering fire. The glow dances across their weathered faces. Out there, darkness and fear. In here, warmth and a fragile spark of hope. Stone and fire. Two gifts that seemed so simple changed the destiny of humankind. They did more than help our ancestors survive. They planted the seeds for the evolution of the mind. And from that moment forward, humanity began a new journey, no longer just running from predators, but slowly learning how to face them. Early humans had their first weapons, but even with stone and fire, they were still far from powerful enough to dominate. On the grasslands of 2.3 million years ago, predators still held the upper hand. To survive, humans needed more than resistance. They needed a strategy, a survival art, the art of evasion. On the savannah, danger lurked everywhere. A leopard could leap down from the trees. A crocodile could lunge suddenly from beneath the water. And in the darkness, saber-toothed cats stalked in complete silence. Humans realized that to stay alive, they had to learn to read every sign, listen to every sound, and avoid places that hid unseen threats. During the day, they moved in groups, never alone. Each member had a role. One scouted the path ahead, another watched the rear, and others gave short warning calls at the first sign of danger. At night, when darkness fell, they sought the safest places. They could find a deep cave, a high rocky outcrop, or the thick branches of a large ancient tree. From there, they could keep watch over the land, while predators struggled to reach them. They also began to develop a primitive form of communication, not with words as we know them today, but with sounds and gestures. A sharp whistle, a loud cry, or simply a raised hand. Each was a signal of warning. Through this coordination, the group could respond swiftly to threats. A glance, a hand movement. Sometimes that was all it took to save the entire group from death. But the art of evasion wasn't just about running. It was about patience and intelligence. Humans learned to move with the rhythm of nature. When the antelope herds lowered their heads to drink, humans crept quietly to the riverbank. When birds suddenly took flight in panic, it meant danger was near. They observed, listened, and adapted, blending into the pulse of the savannah. In the darkness, fire became their ally. They didn't always have it, but when they did, they knew how to keep it burning through the night. Fire didn't just bring light and warmth, it made predators hesitate. Imagine a crescent moon night. In a cave, a few glowing sticks crackle in the fire. Outside, the eyes of hyenas glint in the darkness. They growl, inching forward, then stop at the edge of the flickering flames. Inside the cave, humans huddle close together, hearts pounding but safe. Over thousands of generations, this art of evasion became instinct. Humans learned how to choose the right moment, the safest path, and the best shelter. It was this cautious way of life that kept them alive in a world where death was always near. And more importantly, the skills of evasion not only helped them survive, they sharpened their minds, laying the foundation for the rise of human society. For hundreds of thousands of years, early humans were nothing more than prey scavengers living off what predators left behind. But their intelligence kept evolving. From crude stones and fragile flames, they gradually learned a vital truth. They didn't have to remain prey forever. They could become the hunters. At first, humans only dared to follow large predators. When lions or hyenas finished feeding and moved on, humans crept in, silently picking over the leftover bones. They became scavengers of the dead. But then, step by cautious step, they began to try for themselves. The weak, the small rabbits, birds, tortoises became their first targets. They learned to throw stones with greater accuracy, to use sharpened sticks for stabbing, to drive animals toward cliffs or muddy traps. Most importantly, they learned to cooperate. A single person couldn't bring down an antelope or a wild boar, but a group working together with strategy could tip the balance. This was the moment when intellect began to outmatch brute strength. Their early hunts weren't always successful. Some came back wounded. Sometimes predators swooped in and stole the prize. But each failure taught a lesson. Gradually, they developed techniques hiding in bushes, for an ambush, throwing stones to slow prey, using clubs to deliver the final blow. And then they shared the meat and the precious marrow inside the bones. This was a turning point. From relying on luck, humans began to actively seek their own food. The ability to hunt brought more than just meat, it created connection. In every hunt, each person had a role. One would observe, another would chase, another would block the path. Success depended on teamwork. That coordination trained the minds of our ancestors, paving the way for language, for culture, and for the birth of human communities. Eventually, there came a time when humans dared to face other predators. When hyenas came to steal a carcass, humans no longer ran. They stood in a circle, holding burning branches, throwing stones, shouting fiercely. And in that moment, the balance of power began to shift. For the first time in history, the beasts backed down. Before the species that had once been prey. From fragile creatures, humans had become small but intelligent hunters. Not by speed, not by claws, but through intelligence and unity. That was the great turning point, the moment when humanity began to write its own story of survival. Humans had no clothes, no speed, no thick hide like a rhino, nor the massive muscles of a forest elephant. The only thing they possessed was intelligence, and that was the most powerful weapon of all. Intelligence allowed our ancestors to see beyond the immediate. They didn't just react to danger, they could think ahead, plan, and anticipate. In a world filled with death and predators that made all the difference, they learned how to turn nature into an ally. A cliff became a shield. A muddy swamp could trap large animals. A river not only provided water, it became a natural barrier against predators. Humans used their minds to read the map of the wild and to use it to their advantage. It wasn't just the land. They learned to wield fire as a weapon. When night fell, they held burning torches high and shouted into the darkness. The flickering flames, the echoing cries, all of it struck fear into the hearts of wild beasts. With intelligence, humans turned fear itself into a weapon. But intelligence wasn't just found in tools or fire. It was in their ability to cooperate. One person alone couldn't bring down a large animal, but 10 people working together with a clear plan could achieve the impossible. They divided tasks. Some chased, some blocked the path, some lay in ambush. They learned to communicate through sounds and gestures, and eventually with primitive language. For the first time, the strength of the group surpassed the instincts of the individual. Intelligence also sparked creativity. Humans began crafting more advanced tools, hand axes made from stone-sharpened sticks, hardened in fire. Each small invention became a giant leap in the fight for survival. These tools didn't just make hunting easier, they made predators hesitate. From victims, humans began to become worthy opponents. Picture the scene by a riverside. A group of early humans is carving up an antelope. In the distance, a pack of hyenas approaches. Their eyes gleam with hunger. They growl, but this time the humans don't run. They form a line, holding up stone axes and flaming branches, shouting loudly. Stones fly through the air. The hyenas stop, then retreat. That was a historic moment. The hunted had made the hunters back down. Intelligence also brought memory. Humans remembered where the water was, where animals gathered, and where dangers lay. They passed this knowledge down to their children through gestures, sounds, and eventually language. Those memories became a priceless treasure, helping entire communities survive for generations. Intelligence, it changed everything. It allowed weak, fragile humans to become hunters, defenders, and collaborators. It was a weapon no other creature possessed, and it is the reason why, after millions of years, we are still here, while many of the great predators have vanished. 2.3 million years ago, our ancestors were fragile, tiny beings living in fear among giants. And yet, even in those earliest days, they began forging a remarkable weapon-intelligence cooperation and the will to survive. That legacy still flows through our veins today. Within us lives the memory of the first hunts of nights, huddled around campfires, keeping predators at bay, of voices shouting into the dark to drive away fear. Every step forward our ancestors took laid the foundation for modern humanity. Look at the world today, sprawling cities, technology that touches the sky, ships that reach beyond our planet. It all began with a chipped stone with a single flame preserved in a cave. Without those days of running and fighting on the distant savannas, no civilization would have ever existed. But legacy is more than achievement. It is also a reminder that humans were born into a world of danger, that we learned to unite because alone we could not survive, that we learned to create because our bodies alone could not withstand nature, and that we learned to share because only through community could life be protected. Today, as we stand at the peak of progress, we are still the descendants of those who once survived the wild plains. Our primal fears of darkness, of predators, of death, still echo within us. And the strength of the mind, our ultimate weapon, continues to guide us forward. The legacy of those first days isn't just preserved in fossils or ancient tools. It lives in how we come together in the face of danger. It lives in our relentless desire to go beyond our limits. It lives in the eternal story that those once hunted became masters of the earth. 2.3 million years ago, trembling footsteps echoed across the savannah. Today, those footsteps have carried us to the edge of the sky and beyond. The story of our ancestors proves one truth: humanity's greatest strength was never in muscle, but in mind and in a spirit that never surrenders.